The stars above Earth shimmered brightly as the first human-made faster-than-light ship, the Vanguard, broke through the boundaries of their home solar system to chart a path across the stars. Earth scientists had long dreamed of such a moment, but no one could have predicted the response from the galactic powers that watched from the shadows of deep space. When the Vanguard entered the uncharted galaxy, the ship sent back its first message to Earth, a signal of hope and possibility as it drifted further into the unknown. But as the data streamed back to the Galactic Council, every member of the Assembly sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed upon the screen. As the signal from Earth reached their sensors, a new species had emerged, one capable of traveling faster than light. And while Earth had been unknown to the Council for centuries, the humans had suddenly come into their sightline. The room erupted into whispers and murmurs. The Zorath, the most ancient and powerful species among the Council, immediately demanded action. Their arrogance and centuries of dominance had left them dismissive of lesser species, but the humans were different. They had something that the Council had not seen before: a fire, a spirit that could not be easily extinguished. The Zorath General Rakthar was the first to speak, his voice echoing through the vast chamber, his words sharp as daggers. If the humans are allowed to continue their expansion unchecked, we risk losing our place in the stars. Their defiance could spark the flame of rebellion across the galaxy, and that could not be tolerated. The other species of the Council hesitated, uncertain of how to proceed, but Rakthar's words rang clear to the most conservative members of the Assembly. They feared the rise of a species they could not control. After a long debate, a decision was made. It was time to send a message to Earth. Humanity must be brought into line before their reckless actions threatened the galactic order. And so a fleet was dispatched to Earth, an armada of hundreds of ships that would make their intentions clear to this fledgling species. The ships moved through space like a tidal wave, swallowing up all in their path, their destination set for Earth. The Council had not yet made their demands, but they were already certain the humans would bow before them. When the Zorath fleet arrived above Earth, they sent a communication, a message to President Elena Carter. Their demand was simple: submit to the will of the Galactic Council and relinquish your sovereignty or face annihilation. The broadcast sent waves across the globe. Fear gripped humanity for the first time in years. The old world powers debated frantically. Some urged capitulation, others called for submission, but there was a single voice that stood firm. President Carter was resolute. This was not the way of humanity. She would not let the people of Earth be bent to the will of any alien force, no matter how mighty Earth would fight. And she would lead them into battle. For the first time, humanity felt the true weight of their choice to reach for the stars. Now their very survival was on the line. They did not know what the future would bring, but they were not about to kneel. Not now, not ever. The broadcast from the Zorath fleet hung in the air like a death sentence, echoing through every corner of Earth. Across the globe, from bustling cities to quiet villages, humanity paused. The message was clear: submit to the Galactic Council or face destruction. For the first time, Earth found itself staring into the cold eyes of an unimaginable force. It was a challenge unlike any before, one that demanded unity, resolve, and action. Inside the command center of Earth's military, President Elena Carter stood resolute as the faces of her advisors and generals filled the room. The gravity of the situation weighed on them all, but Carter's voice was steady, unwavering. "Prepare for war," she said. The words sent a ripple through the room, but none dared to question her. This was no longer a matter of diplomacy or negotiation. This was survival. Humanity had long feared the vastness of the galaxy, often wondering if they were truly alone. But now, they were not only not alone, they were being threatened by a force that could wipe them from existence with a flick of their fingers. But the more Carter looked at the screen showing the Zorath fleet, the more a fire ignited within her. Humanity had always been a species that fought, that pushed beyond limits, that thrived against impossible odds. If they could reach the stars, they could fight to protect their home. The world leaders convened emergency summits. The United Nations, the European Union, the Chinese People's Assembly, and more met in a series of tense teleconferences. No one hesitated. No one doubted. Every country, every people, Every nation stood united in their decision. The Zoreth's offer was a declaration of war, and humanity would not surrender. Meanwhile, across the world, scientists and engineers scrambled to prepare. Project Aegis, a classified defense initiative developed in secret for just such a moment, was activated. The project was the culmination of years of reverse engineering, blending alien technology from previous encounters and human ingenuity. Hidden beneath Earth's surface, in a network of underground bunkers, the project's final phase was set into motion. Aegis was humanity's hope, a fleet of advanced ships equipped with energy shields, plasma weaponry, and warp drive capabilities. But more than that, Aegis was a statement, a declaration that humanity would not simply submit to foreign powers, no matter how advanced they were. As the first Zoreth strike began, with massive energy cannons firing from the alien ships, Earth responded in kind. A series of blasts erupted from the ground, sending waves of shockwaves through the atmosphere. Humanity's counteroffensive was a surprise, and it caught the Zoreth off guard. The alien ships, expecting a quick surrender, were instead met with a barrage of fire from Earth's newly armed vessels. Plasma bolts and laser beams streaked across the sky as the first battle between humanity and the galactic invaders unfolded. The Zoreth fleet, though far superior in numbers, found themselves at a disadvantage. Humanity's ships were faster, more maneuverable, and their weapons deadlier than the invaders had anticipated. In the chaos, several Zoreth ships were struck, their shields failing as plasma fire tore through their hulls. The invaders began to panic, unable to adjust to the unpredictability of human warfare. Earth's forces had no experience in fighting galactic powers, but what they lacked in technology they made up for in sheer determination. On Earth's surface, the situation was just as tense. Civilian shelters were activated across the world, but there was no hiding from the enormous fleet hanging overhead. Humanity had one advantage. Its people knew how to adapt, how to survive, and how to fight together when faced with overwhelming odds. Across every continent, military forces and civilians alike united for the defense of their world. In the control room of Project Aegis, President Carter watched the battle unfold on a holographic display, her eyes hard with focus. She knew this was just the beginning. The Zoreth would come again with more force. But for the first time in centuries, humanity was not just standing by. They were fighting back, and that was something the aliens had never seen before. The message was clear to the Zoreth and the entire Galactic Council. Humanity would not bend, would not kneel. They were prepared to fight for their place among the stars and for their future. The battle raged for hours, and the sky above Earth was filled with the deafening sound of distant explosions and the crackling hum of energy shields. The Zoreth, stunned by the resilience of humanity, began to regroup. Their fleet had suffered significant damage, but they were not a race accustomed to defeat. It was only a matter of time before they would return stronger, more determined to crush this unexpected threat. On Earth, however, the mood was far from one of fear. Across the globe, people watched the conflict unfold on screens, their faces set with grim determination. News anchors reported live from the front lines, but even as they spoke, humanity's resolve grew. Cities mobilized, industry shifted into high gear, and soldiers lined up in preparation for a war that had just begun. President Elena Carter, standing in the control room, knew this was a turning point. The world was united, no longer divided by borders or political struggles. This fight was bigger than any one nation. It was about survival. In the heart of the battle, Earth's forces had managed to drive back the first wave of Zoreth ships. Humanity's experimental Aegis fighters, armed with advanced plasma cannons and kinetic shields, darted around enemy vessels, weaving through their fire with expert precision. The Aegis ship's agility surprised the Zoreth, who had expected to dominate the skies with their larger, more powerful warships. The humans' ability to adapt on the fly, to turn their technology into an advantage, was proving to be their most lethal weapon. Captain Miriam Hayes, one of the Aegis pilots, led her squadron into the heart of the Zoreth fleet. Her ship, Horizon's Edge, was a marvel of human engineering, built with the latest alien-derived tech and outfitted with cutting-edge weaponry. As she darted between the Zorath warships, she could feel the pulse of the battle around her. Each move was a calculated risk, but humanity's ability to think outside the box gave her the confidence to keep pushing forward. "Keep your distance," she barked into her comms. "Their shields are strong, but we've got the firepower to punch through. Aim for the weak spots." Her squadron broke formation and began a series of coordinated attacks, focusing on the Zorath ship's vulnerable engines and weapon systems. Plasma bolts tore through the enemy fleet as human ships swiftly evaded counterfire. One by one, the Zorath vessels began to falter, their once unstoppable fleet now buckling under the weight of humanity's surprise tactics. It was no longer a simple defense. Humanity was on the offensive. Back on Earth, the world watched in awe as their forces gained the upper hand. The alien invaders, for the first time, found themselves struggling to maintain control. It was a scene never imagined by the Council, the once unchallenged power of the Zorath, now facing a resistance that refused to back down. As the Zorath fleet reeled from the attack, they called for reinforcements, sending a signal to the Galactic Council. The Council, sensing the shift in momentum, deliberated in their chambers. Some members argued that humanity's unpredictable nature made them too dangerous to leave unchecked. Others, however, saw an opportunity to assimilate Earth into the galactic fold. If humanity could be convinced to join the Council voluntarily, perhaps their resistance could be quelled without further conflict. But the Zorath were not so inclined. They were not a race that understood negotiation, especially when it came to a species that dared to defy them. The Council's request to Earth to submit and join the Galactic Order was still on the table. But the humans knew better. They had faced tyranny before, and they would face it again if necessary. On the ground, President Carter convened a war council in the Underground Command Center. Leaders from around the world met, strategizing their next move. Earth was ready to fight for its place among the stars, and Carter knew this war had only just begun. The Zorath may have underestimated humanity's resilience, but now they were learning the hard way. As the Zorath fleet retreated temporarily, nursing their wounds, the humans prepared for what was next. Earth's defenses were holding, and the first wave of counterattacks had proven that humanity would not go quietly. With each passing hour, their forces grew stronger, more coordinated, more determined. The fight for Earth was only beginning, and humanity's resolve was unshakable. As the weeks passed, the war between humanity and the Zorath escalated. Earth's defense forces had proven more capable than the Zorath ever expected, and with each passing day, humanity's resilience grew stronger. But the Zorath were not a race to be so easily defeated, and they quickly adapted to humanity's tactics. Their next move was more brutal, more calculated. They had underestimated Earth's ability to fight back, but now they would not make the same mistake again. Back on Earth, President Elena Carter sat at the heart of the war room, surrounded by generals and military strategists. The holographic map in front of her displayed the locations of key battles, enemy fleets, and humanity's own defenses. The situation was grim. Though they had won several significant victories, the Zorath were relentless. Their vast fleet was reassembling, readying for a full-scale invasion of Earth itself. "We need to hit them before they can launch their full offensive," General Dominic Pierce said, his voice tense. "If we wait, they'll bring in reinforcements, and we'll lose the advantage." Carter nodded, her expression hardening. "I agree. We can't afford to wait. But we need to be smart about this. We've dealt them a heavy blow, but their time manipulation technology is something we still don't fully understand. We can't just throw everything at them blindly." For the first time in the war, Earth's leaders were faced with a new kind of enemy, one that didn't fight fair. The Zorath had revealed a terrifying ability. They could manipulate time. Using advanced temporal technology, they had the power to reverse the outcomes of battles, erasing humanity's hard-won victories. If this technology wasn't neutralized, Earth could find itself caught in an endless cycle of defeat, never able to break free. In a high-security lab hidden deep within Earth's most secure military base, Dr. Lyle Gregor, humanity's top scientist, had spent weeks analyzing the wreckage of a captured Zoreth ship. After painstaking research, he discovered a vital flaw in their temporal technology, an instability that could be exploited if humans could get close enough to one of the Zoreth's central command ships. Dr. Gregor presented his findings to President Carter and the War Council. If we can disrupt the Zoreth's temporal field generators, we can negate their ability to reverse time during battles. But it will require a direct assault on one of their capital ships, one of their fleet's flagship vessels. The plan was risky, but it was their only shot at neutralizing the Zoreth's time manipulation advantage. Carter knew that if Earth was going to win this war, they had to strike at the heart of the enemy's power, not just fend off their attacks. "Prepare a strike force," Carter ordered. "We're going after their flagship. No one else will be able to break through their defenses the way we can." The task was given to Captain Miriam Hayes, who had proven herself time and again as a brilliant tactician and fearless leader. Under her command, a specialized team of elite soldiers and Aegis pilots would launch a covert operation deep within Zoreth territory. The mission was simple in theory: infiltrate the flagship, find the temporal generator, and destroy it. As Captain Hayes and her team prepared for the mission, Earth's forces began to make their final preparations for an all-out attack. Humanity's fleet was still small compared to the Zoreth's vast armada, but it was fierce and well-coordinated, equipped with human ingenuity and alien technology working in harmony. The day of the mission arrived, and the tension was palpable. Captain Hayes stood on the bridge of Horizon's Edge, watching the stars outside as the ship prepared to depart. Her squadron of Aegis fighters was ready. There would be no turning back. They were going to infiltrate the heart of the Zoreth's empire, where danger awaited at every turn. The fleet launched into space, heading directly for the Zoreth flagship. As they neared enemy territory, the tension became almost unbearable. But there was no time to hesitate. The Zoreth would soon realize that humanity wasn't just fighting to defend their planet. They were fighting to break the Zoreth's hold on the galaxy. The fleet split into smaller groups, each one tasked with a specific objective. Captain Hayes and her team were in the front, prepared to take on the impossible. The countdown to the assault had begun, and humanity's hope rested in their hands. The Zoreth's time manipulation technology was their greatest weapon, and it would be humanity's greatest victory if they could destroy it. The first shots fired, and the battle for the Zoreth flagship began. The battle around the Zoreth flagship was like nothing humanity had ever faced. The Zoreth ships, massive and menacing, loomed like shadows in the depths of space, their weapons unleashing devastating blasts that tore through the void. But Captain Miriam Hayes and her squadron of Aegis pilots cut through the chaos with precision and ferocity. The human fighters, agile and unpredictable, darted through enemy fire, their plasma cannons cutting down Zoreth ships one by one. "We've got their attention," Captain Hayes muttered, her hands steady on the controls as Horizon's Edge evaded another round of enemy fire. Her voice crackled through the comms. "Squadron, keep pushing forward. We're not just here to fight. We're here to win." Her words were met with a chorus of affirmations from her squadron. They were humans, outnumbered and outgunned. But the one thing the Zoreth didn't understand was the power of human will. Humanity had always been a species that refused to back down, no matter the odds. That relentless spirit was now their greatest weapon. As they neared the flagship, the Zoreth launched their counteroffensive, a wave of enemy ships designed specifically to protect the temporal generator. These ships were different from the standard Zoreth vessels, faster and more heavily armed, and their sole purpose was to prevent any intruder from reaching the heart of their technological advantage. The fleet swarmed like hornets, encircling Horizon's Edge and its squadron, forcing the human fighters into a brutal dogfight. Captain Hayes knew time was running out. The Zoreth's flagship had a heavily shielded core, and the longer they delayed, the more reinforcements would arrive. Her eyes scanned the dark expanse of space, then locked onto the massive silhouette of the flagship, its enormous hull bristling with energy weapons. They had to get inside. "We're splitting up," Hayes commanded. "Pilots, break formation. We need to find a weak spot." The squadron broke apart, each pilot taking their own route through the web of enemy ships. Hayes pushed Horizon's edge to its limits, weaving through blasts of plasma and enemy fire. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was focused. The Zoreth's time manipulation technology was the key to their power, and it was hidden somewhere inside that massive ship. The only way to stop the war was to destroy it. Inside the Zoreth flagship, things were just as tense. The crew, vast in number and elite in training, scrambled to repel the human attackers. But something was different this time. There was an unfamiliar sense of unease among the Zoreth commanders. They had never anticipated that their temporal technology would be their undoing. It was not just an advanced weapon. It was a symbol of their dominance. And now, that symbol was being threatened by a species they considered primitive. The central command room hummed with activity as Zoreth officers frantically tried to lock down the ship's core. The temporal generators, tucked away in the heart of the flagship, were their last line of defense. If the humans breached it, they could destabilize the entire Zoreth fleet's time manipulation abilities. The Zoreth knew they could not allow that to happen. Not now. Not ever. Captain Hayes' voice rang out through the comms again. "Target acquired. I'm making my run." She steered Horizon's edge toward the flagship's underside, where a weak point in its armor had been identified. The rest of the squadron followed, their weapons locked onto the Zoreth ships as they cleared the path. The enemy's defensive fire intensified, but it was too late. With a mighty roar, Horizon's edge unleashed a volley of plasma fire straight at the weak point. The explosion rocked the Zoreth flagship, sending shockwaves through the space around them. "Direct hit," Hayes yelled into her comm. But they weren't done yet. As the flagship shuddered from the impact, Captain Hayes knew they had only seconds before the Zoreth launched a counterattack. Her ship rocked violently as enemy blasts pummeled it, but she held her course. Her squadron was still with her, their fire relentless, keeping the Zoreth distracted just long enough. "Now," Hayes barked, "take it down." With a final, determined push, the Aegis squadron dove deeper into the flagship's defenses. The temporal generator's core was just ahead, its glowing energy field pulsating like a beating heart. This was the moment. With one last volley of energy blasts, Captain Hayes and her team sent everything they had into the generator. The explosion was cataclysmic. A flash of light erupted from the heart of the flagship, engulfing the surrounding ships in a blinding wave. For a moment, time itself seemed to twist, as if the universe was caught in the throes of a great upheaval. Then, silence. The temporal generator was gone. The Zoreth flagship shuddered and began to collapse, its time-manipulating power now shattered. The rest of the fleet, without the temporal advantage, faltered. Earth's fighters seized the opportunity, launching one final offensive against the crippled fleet. Captain Hayes exhaled, her heart racing. They had done it. The war was far from over, but they had struck the Zoreth's greatest weapon, and humanity had won a crucial victory. Now, with the Zoreth's power broken, humanity had a fighting chance. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time, Earth stood on equal footing with the galaxy's greatest forces. The tide had turned. The explosion that tore through the heart of the Zoreth flagship was the beginning of the end for their dominance over the galaxy. The temporal generator was gone, shattered into millions of pieces that now floated aimlessly in the vacuum of space. Without it, the Zoreth fleet was crippled. The invincible, fearsome armada that had once held the galaxy in its grip now faltered, vulnerable and disorganized. Humanity had struck a blow that echoed across the stars, but there was still much to be done. In the aftermath of the attack, Captain Miriam Hayes and her squadron of Aegis pilots gathered in the command center of Horizon's Edge, their faces drawn with exhaustion, but their spirits unbroken. The Zoreth fleet was reeling, but they knew that victory could not be claimed yet. The flagship's destruction had shattered the temporal capabilities, but the Zoreth were not a race that would simply give up. They would retaliate. The Galactic Council was watching, and it was only a matter of time before they sent reinforcements. "We've done the impossible," Hayes said, her voice steady despite the fatigue weighing on her. "But this isn't over. We've hurt them, but we need to finish what we started." Her words echoed in the quiet control room. President Carter, who had been monitoring the situation from Earth's command center, spoke next, her voice calm but resolute. "Captain, your team has done more than we could have hoped for. The Zoreth fleet is in disarray, but they are still formidable. The Council will not allow this humiliation to stand. We need to prepare for their next move." It was clear that the destruction of the temporal generator had given humanity a powerful advantage, but it was also a signal to the Zoreth that they could not let this affront go unpunished. The Council, consisting of ancient and powerful species from all corners of the galaxy, would surely act swiftly. The human fleet was still small compared to the might of the Council, and there was no telling what kind of reinforcements the Zoreth could summon. "We need to fortify our position," General Pierce added, stepping forward. "If we don't take advantage of this window, the Zoreth will regroup and retaliate with a vengeance. We can't risk them regaining control." President Carter nodded, her mind already working through the options. "I want the Aegis fleet to focus on protecting key locations across Earth. We'll continue developing our defenses and keep our forces ready for a counterattack. But we need to show the Council that humanity will not be intimidated. We're not just defending Earth anymore. We're standing up to them." Hayes and her team, still catching their breath, exchanged glances. They knew the stakes were high. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Their victory was a signal to the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. But would that message be enough to hold back the Council's wrath? Meanwhile, the Zoreth were far from defeated. Their commanders were gathering in a private council meeting aboard the remains of the flagship. Their defeat was incomprehensible. How had the humans, an unknown species to the Council, been able to destroy their greatest weapon? The loss of the temporal generator had shattered the Zoreth's plans, but it had also ignited a fury within them. Their pride, their very sense of superiority, had been bruised. The thought of a human uprising spreading throughout the galaxy was anathema to everything they stood for. "Get me the Council," Rakthar, the Zoreth general, growled. "This will not go unanswered." As Rakthar's call was made, the Council responded swiftly. Their most powerful members convened, and their decision was clear. Earth was no longer just a nuisance. It was a threat to the very fabric of the galactic order. The time for diplomacy had passed. The Zoreth would lead the charge, but they would not be alone. The Galactic Council's full might would be unleashed against Earth, and they would make an example of humanity. Back on Earth, the atmosphere was tense. Humanity had won a critical battle, but they had also drawn the attention of the galaxy's most powerful beings. The Zoreth were regrouping, and soon, the full weight of the Galactic Council would descend upon them. There was no room for complacency. President Carter stood before the holographic map of Earth's defenses, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We've done the impossible, but now we prepare for what's next. Humanity will not be crushed by the Council. We will stand and fight until the very end." She knew that Earth's future depended on their ability to hold the line. The Zoreth would not give up easily, and the Council's forces would soon arrive. But for the first time in history, humanity had shown that they were no longer the weak link in the galaxy. They were ready to face whatever came next, together. The Zoreth might have been a force to be reckoned with, but humanity had already proven that they could fight back. And when the next battle came, they would be ready. The calm before the storm was brief. Earth's victory over the Zoreth flagship had sent ripples through the galaxy, and those ripples soon became a tidal wave. The Galactic Council, now fully aware of humanity's defiance, was quick to respond. The Zorath were rallying their allies, and reinforcements were on the way. It was clear now. This was no longer just a fight for Earth. It was a fight for the very survival of humanity as a free species. President Elena Carter stood on the bridge of Earth's primary defense station, Fortitude, watching the holographic display of incoming threats. The Zorath, along with their allies, the insectoid Karlix and the shadowy Orcs, had begun mobilizing a massive fleet. Each race had its own agenda, but all shared a single objective: to ensure humanity's submission. And they were bringing everything they had. "We've intercepted their communications," General Dominic Pierce reported, his voice tight with urgency. "The Zorath have called upon the full might of the Council. They plan to arrive within the next few days, and when they do, Earth will be their first target." Carter's mind raced, but her expression remained calm. The war was escalating, but humanity had already proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most advanced species. The question was, could they do it again? And this time, would they be able to break through the seemingly invincible forces of the Council? "We have to make them feel the cost of their actions," Carter said, her voice steady, unwavering. "They need to understand that Earth will not be an easy conquest. We will strike first, before they get too close." General Pierce nodded. "We've developed a new weapon, Project Hammerfall. It's a prototype, but it's our best chance of taking out their flagship before they can get close." Project Hammerfall was humanity's last-ditch effort, a massive, experimental weapon capable of launching a concentrated beam of energy, capable of piercing even the thickest of shields. It had been in development for years, but only now, on the eve of humanity's most critical battle, was it ready to be deployed. "We've been working on this in secret for years," Dr. Lyle Gregor, the head of Earth's scientific division, added. "It uses a combination of Zorath technology and human ingenuity. It's a long shot, but if we can catch them off guard, we might have a chance to cripple their fleet before they even land." The plan was risky, but it was the only option they had. Project Hammerfall would need to be fired from the surface of Earth, targeting the Zorath's largest command ship as it entered orbit. The weapon had never been tested at full capacity, and there was no guarantee it would work. But without it, humanity would be overwhelmed by the incoming fleet. Back at Earth's Defense Command Center, the mood was tense. Military forces from every nation had united to defend the planet. Aegis pilots readied their ships, their weapons primed, and their minds sharp. The world had been unified under the banner of survival, and there was no going back now. "Captain Hayes," President Carter said over the comms, her voice firm, "your squadron will play a critical role in this operation. We need you to intercept any Zorath ships that get too close to Earth while Project Hammerfall charges. You'll be our first line of defense." Hayes, now a seasoned veteran of this war, nodded. "Understood, Madam President. We'll hold the line." As Hayes and her team prepared for what could be their final battle, President Carter turned to the rest of the War Council. "This is humanity's moment. We can't afford to fail. Earth has stood for too long as an outpost on the edge of the galaxy. If we fall, the entire galaxy will know what happens when you challenge the will of humanity." With the Zorath fleet closing in, Project Hammerfall began its charge. The immense weapon, buried beneath the surface of Earth, hummed with the energy of 1,000 suns. It would take hours to reach full power, and every minute that passed brought them closer to a showdown with the Galactic powers. The clock was ticking, and the enemy was closing in fast. From orbit, the Zorath's fleet was a dark cloud, vast and overwhelming. It was only a matter of time before they would strike. But for now, humanity had one final advantage: surprise. In the dark void of space, Captain Hayes and her squadron surged forward, ready to meet the Zorath head-on. The war was far from over, but humanity's resolve had never been clearer. This was their fight for survival, and they would not go down without making the galaxy remember who they were. With or without the Council's approval, Earth had taken its place among the stars, and it would not be erased. The stage was set, the countdown had begun, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The final moments before the battle felt like an eternity. Earth's defenses were bracing for the full force of the Zorath and their allies, the Karliks and the Orcs. Captain Miriam Hayes and her Aegis squadron, along with humanity's fleets, were positioned at key points in Earth's defense grid, prepared to hold the line for as long as possible. Above them, Earth's experimental weapon, Project Hammerfall, was reaching its peak charge, the air crackling with energy as humanity's last hope grew more powerful with every second. The Zorath fleet loomed like a tidal wave. Their ships were enormous, their shields nearly impenetrable, and their weapons designed to obliterate anything that stood in their way. Yet the humans held their ground, determination burning in their eyes. There was no turning back now. The battle would begin, and the galaxy would either witness humanity's victory or their extinction. "Squadron, on me." Captain Hayes's voice was sharp and commanding, cutting through the chatter on the comms. "We make our stand here. We will not let them reach Earth. If we fall today, humanity falls. But if we survive, the galaxy will remember us." Her words were met with a chorus of affirmatives. The pilots of her squadron, once unsure and scared, had been forged into warriors. The chaos of previous battles had only sharpened their skills, and they were ready to face the Zorath, ready to face the Council itself. "Project Hammerfall is at full charge," General Pierce reported, his face a grim mask of determination. "We've calculated the trajectory. If it hits, it'll be the hardest blow we've dealt to them yet. But we'll need you to buy us time." The Zorath fleet began to move into position, slowly and deliberately. It was clear they were confident in their superior numbers and firepower, but they had underestimated one thing: humanity's resilience. The human fleet, though outgunned, held a hidden advantage. They knew how to fight under pressure, how to adapt and overcome the odds. As the battle began, the first volley of energy blasts from the Zorath ships tore through the empty void of space. Explosions erupted across the human fleet, but the Aegis pilots dodged and retaliated with swift precision. Hayes weaved Horizon's edge through a flurry of plasma fire, her heart pounding in her chest, but her mind clear. The fight was on. "Form up," Hayes barked. "Stay with me. We're not giving them an inch." Her squadron dove into the fray, their ships twisting and turning with remarkable agility as they fired on the enemy vessels. The Zorath ships retaliated with overwhelming force, but humanity's fighters were nimble and precise. In moments, a Zorath warship exploded into a ball of fire as one of the Aegis pilots scored a direct hit. The humans were proving that they were far from defenseless. Back on Earth, Project Hammerfall's massive weapon, hidden beneath layers of rock and steel, hummed with an unimaginable energy, a surge of raw power ready to unleash itself upon the enemy. Earth's defenders had given everything to protect the planet, and now it was time for the final decisive strike. "Target locked," the commander of Project Hammerfall's control station said. "Ready to fire on your command, President Carter." The entire room fell silent as the countdown began. President Carter stood at the center of the operations room, her gaze fixed on the screen. She had watched the rise of humanity, and now she would see its place in the galaxy secured. She knew the gravity of the decision that lay before her. "Fire," Carter said, her voice steady but resolute. A massive beam of concentrated energy shot up from Earth's surface, piercing the atmosphere with the brilliance of 1,000 suns. The beam collided with the flagship at the heart of the Zorath fleet, tearing through its shields and slamming into its core. The ship's immense structure buckled under the assault, and in a cataclysmic explosion, the flagship was obliterated. The shockwave sent ripples through the battlefield, and for a brief moment, everything was still. The Zorath fleet faltered, their forces disoriented by the loss of their command ship. The Aegis pilots seized the moment, launching a final assault on the now vulnerable enemy ships. Humanity's fleet pressed forward with all the fury of a species fighting for its survival. But the battle wasn't over. The Zoreth still had forces in reserve, and their allies were not yet broken. The Council had not yet shown its full strength, and there was still the possibility of more reinforcements arriving. However, the loss of their flagship and the devastating blow dealt by Project Hammerfall had shaken the Zoreth to their core. "We've done it," General Pierce said, his voice filled with awe. "We've broken their line." The remaining Zoreth ships began to retreat, their morale shattered, their command structure crippled. Earth's defenses had held, against all odds. The final victory was not in the destruction of a single fleet, but in humanity's ability to stand firm in the face of overwhelming power. As the dust settled, Captain Hayes took a moment to survey the battlefield. Her squadron had survived. Earth had survived. And for the first time in history, humanity had claimed a victory over the galaxy's greatest powers. "Today, we didn't just defend our planet," Captain Hayes said, her voice carrying over the comms. "We sent a message. Humanity is no longer just a footnote in the galaxy. We are here, and we will fight for our place among the stars." As the last of the Zoreth ships retreated into the void, the galaxy would never forget the day when the Galactic Council had pleaded for mercy, and humanity had unleashed its wrath.